You know what it feels like to be judged simply because of how you look?
Of course I do. I'm part robot. Let's go find Robin.
Wait.
Teen Titans was hit or miss with how it depicted the serious topics it brought up. It certainly gave attention to a lot of issues, but I think it's also important to do more than simply bringing it up and also understand what's actually being said beyond just Sonic Says style lessons. There certainly were a lot of racism episodes back in the day. A lot of them were not very good. I want to talk about what I feel is one of the bigger misses, Troc. You know, the Teen Titans racism episode where Starfire experiences xenophobic bigotry from Val-Yor. Since we're going to be talking about heavy racism, I thought I'd just open with a fun fact. Did you know that Stephen Root is Val-Yor's voice actor? It's Gil Dotrieve.
Keep your filthy hands off me, Troc!
You may not value my life, but I still value yours.
To the show's credit, they start off strong, and one of the most important things here is that Val-Yor is a superhero. It'd be easy to think he'd be a twist villain, but no, he's helping to save the planet and on good terms with all the Titans save for Starfire. Now, none of that makes him any less of a xenophobic shithead who needs to get his ass handed to him. This isn't minimizing the harm of his actions. You can be a good person in other respects and still be a bigot. Bigots are normal, everyday people around us who normalize and make their bigotry something casual and seen as socially acceptable, which is why people often don't stand up. The idea that only bad people can be bigots, abusers, and predators is frequently used for people to rationalize and defend harmful behavior like this. So they made the right call making Val-Yor a superhero, but I also feel they don't properly use that, and get into why it's important to show. We'll put a pin in that for now because it's going to come up later. The plot centers around Val-Yor having a mission to defeat evil aliens. The Titans volunteer to help, and Val-Yor genuinely respects them all, again except for Starfire, who he is actively hostile to. He then calls her a stupid Troc, which we're later told means that you are nothing. Troc is intentionally written as a fictional xenophobic slur towards Tamaranians, people of Starfire's home planet, to dehumanize them.
I don't need any help from a stupid Troc.
Val-Yor thinks all of us are great.
Well, we are all great.
Some more great than others.
Things get far worse, however, when Val-Yor sends Starfire on a death mission with the implication he intends to use her as a scapegoat, and sees her as the most expendable person to potentially get killed, which, yeah, bigots actively wanting you dead is par of the course. Cyborg notices her discomfort and follows up to ask if she's actually okay, and we get this scene.
Troc? What does that mean?
It means nothing.
This episode uses Cyborg to sort of bridge the gap between the allegorical xenophobia towards the Tamaranians and the real-world implications it's referencing since, you know, Cyborg is black. He's the first to notice her discomfort and is ultimately the first person she confides in that Val-Yor is racist, or really more xenophobic, but you get the point. Even when Starfire is out on the deadliest mission of the group, Dude is still out there belittling her even further. Similar to an earlier scene where he compliments everyone's fighting skills except Starfire, who he reprimands. There's a brief moment during this explosion where it looks like Starfire might have gotten hurt and her team is naturally terrified because, what if? After the mission, Cyborg goes to congratulate Starfire for a job well done and calls her Trocky, not realizing he's using a slur.
Way to go, Trocky!
You do not call me that.
But Val-Yor calls you Troc all the time.
That does not make it right.
What's up?
This is where the episode starts to unravel at the seams, and that one clip that gets played all over social media that's supposedly brilliant comes through.
You know what it feels like to be judged simply because of how you look?
Of course I do. I'm part robot.
The fuck is he talking about?
Oh look, they said robot and not that he's black. This is somehow profound because it's subtle, I guess. I think it's not okay that of all the people who slip up and are in the position of ally here, it is wild to make the black disabled boy be the one in this role. Robin is right there. I get that this is how Cyborg has Starfire's back more than anyone, but I'm also tired of shows doing allegories for bigotry of some kind, where because they're using non-human characters, they write them in a way where the oppressed character is coded or voiced by someone who in the real situation is the privileged party, and the person who needs to learn and change is the most marginalized person in the room. There were other better ways to have Cyborg come to learn this. Wednesday has a recent example where the black mayor is literally told that people like you have no idea what it's like to not be believed. And writers constantly project this white gaze fantasy of putting black people, especially in these positions, to picture themselves as the victims and to be able to tell off black people. The robot line works even less because Cyborg is also disabled, and disabled people, especially black disabled people, are also frequently abused and dehumanized. It's even directly written in the series, as Cyborg is used as a disabled character in multiple episodes like Only Human, which incidentally also leans into a harmful and ableist plotline where he's basically pushing himself past his limits and bootstrapping his way through, rather than working around or respecting what his body is telling him. Or in this episode where it's shown that he has a disabled kid showing how he relates to Cyborg, only for Cyborg to minimize said kid's feelings by telling him he shouldn't relate to him for being disabled. The idea that this is somehow meant to be some kind of profound subversion just ends up highlighting how the writers don't recognize that they're writing him both as black and disabled, and flip-flop on when they want him to actually be that identity. The fact that most of the Titans and other characters, notably Robin, Raven, Starfire, and Jinx, to name a few that I'm aware of, are originally coded after several non-white people already, and subsequently whitewashed in the 2003 version, which only makes it all the more annoying. Why is the black disabled boy meant to be the face of poor allyship in an episode of nearly entirely white voice talent as written by predominantly white writers? I can understand having to get this episode past approval lines and whatnot because this is a product for an industry at the end of the day, but leaning in on Cyborg being both black and disabled would then be the way to go. But I also have a hard time accepting that they couldn't sneak "because I'm black" past the network, because Static Shock managed to just be the thing directly in talking about anti-black racism several years before Teen Titans. The Static Shock episode Sons of the Fathers approaches a similar topic, though it doesn't really focus much on Static's reaction, and instead focuses more on Richie, Static's friend's reaction to it, and it's incredibly unsubtle. And that's not a criticism.
This is my friend Virgil. Remember I told you about him?
Not nearly enough.
Some rap is positive, Mr. Foley.
It's all garbage. It tells kids to write on walls, stay out past curfews, and heaven knows what else. It tears down everything guys like me built. Look around you, Dakota's gone to pot. Well, not in my house. And now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are.
Keep your voice down.
It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
We know why this dude hates rap. There's layers to the commentary, like the way this white woman who isn't racist herself but nonetheless is fully aware of how her husband is and indirectly co-signs it. Richie's dad is openly anti-black, and the episode instead focuses on his son disowning him, running away from home, and any attempt at reformation on his part is more rooted in him being a better father, because he doesn't even recognize anything about his son or his interests. Richie leaves because of several other things before this, and his dad disrespecting his best friend was the last straw. I feel Static Shock works a lot better because it tries to keep to a few smaller topics with an overarching theme of people in power not helping black and other non-white communities, and how housing insecurity is the result of racism, ableism, and familial abuse. Richie's dad searches for his son alongside Virgil's dad, and the two meet several homeless or unhoused kids along the way, most of whom are in that place because they ran away from abusive and harmful parents. The show is not interrogating Richie's place as an ally. He already stands firmly in Virgil's corner, and doesn't like his dad who acts like Richie owes him for doing the bare minimum as a parent.
Little punk.
I talk to kids like this every day, Foley. Most of them are good kids, but sometimes when they don't see eye to eye with their parents, they feel like they'd rather be anywhere but home. Even a place like this. Ignorant, and proud of that too. And you know the worst part?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
You've got a terrific son. One of the best and brightest around. And because of the way you are, you'll never really know him. Richie ran away from you a long time ago, Foley. And who can blame him?
By the end of the episode, we see Sean take a more active part in his son's life and is shown to be civil toward Virgil, but I don't take this to mean he's magically not racist anymore. Plenty of racist and queerphobic people still support the same systems that do harm, and they can be nice and sociable to individual black or queer people. I never took this as him magically changing for the better because this still doesn't magically fix his relationship with his son either. I still don't find this episode perfect, but the focus that Static Shock really drives in on is not empathizing with or prioritizing to change a racist, but instead understanding and empathizing with homeless or unhoused kids who escape abusive parents, which is how and why we empathize more with Richie, who is willing to run away from home to not be around his dad. Static Shock is ultimately trying to discuss and accomplish an entirely separate goal from Teen Titans despite discussing the same material, where Troc tries and fails, I feel, to censor the experience of the direct victim of racism, while Static Shock focuses on the conditions that drive people, particularly kids, into being unhoused. It's one of the biggest themes Static Shock revolves its plotlines around. Teen Titans makes a strong and important point that some people will always be bigoted and will not change, but it undermines itself in how it attempts to subject Starfire to many of the same respectability politics that victims of racism are subjected to outside of the fictional comparison.
But wait! There's more!
Now that Cyborg knows Valior is being bigoted towards Starfire, he immediately tells Robin, who makes it clear he wants Valior to pay. This leads to one of the worst lines in the episode.
Starfire, why didn't you say something? He will apologize. I'm going to make...
No, Robin. Our mission is more important than my feelings.
Holy shit. Yikes. There's a much better explanation as to why Starfire wouldn't tell anyone, because everyone likes Valior. Starfire is even shown to feel ostracized from her friends because they're all speaking so highly of Valior, who's been nothing but bigoted to her. They didn't even catch that he was doing nothing but belittling her, that he never refers to her by name until the end of the episode, and that most blatantly he's repeatedly referring to her with a slur. The show has an interesting potential that's ultimately squandered because the episode never depicts the challenges in your supposed allies never having your back. The hardest thing for me to believe in this episode isn't the teenagers with superpowers or the alien robots, but the idea that your white friend would be this quick to have your back upon being told someone he admired was racist toward you. And it's fine if they don't want that for the show. It'd be a real bummer if we had to watch the rest of the show knowing that most of the Titans are just complicit and shitty allies who couldn't be bothered to properly have Starfire's back when she was on the receiving end of bigotry. But then why bother writing this in the first place if you know that the Titans aren't well-suited characters for this? The difficulty and added challenge of your abuser not only being seen as a good person people refuse to see as harmful, and your allies admiring and ultimately having to turn against them is the core reason why it's so difficult to be the one to voice what's going on. Additionally, the entire episode works on the idea that a slur used to dehumanize Starfire is only bad because it hurt her feelings. Feelings she is framed as sympathetic by too many viewers for ignoring in favor of focusing on the bigger picture. Slurs are mean and hurtful, but the root issue with them is that they connect to systems of institutional violence. Calling a black person shithead is also mean and hurtful, but it's not the same as calling us nigga or thug. When black people are stalked or killed, we're dehumanized by being framed in a way that suggests we deserve to be killed. That's the very thing that Thug normalizes and what Troc misses. It's not just that it's mean words and ends with hurt feelings and judgment. It's that there's a power differential in the society where the slur exists, where institutional violence toward a targeted group of people is normalized and rationalized with the narratives the slur evokes. I can't ignore or overlook when people try to paint me as an aggressive black man or tries to call me some sort of thug, because those things are used to rationalize the abuse, scrutiny, and death of black people. If you only take away don't call black people thugs because it hurts their feelings, then you're not grasping what makes it so dangerous. It's always, just obey the law, or you shouldn't have done this, or be less suspicious. You were asking for it when you dress like that, pull up your pants, and so much more in the way of respectability politics. It doesn't matter that you're not actively using a slur with the intention of harming someone, because the narrative and institutional violence behind it is inherently harmful. I get that you have limited screen time and this is a complicated issue to discuss, but you're also not obligated to discuss it in a show, and a lot of the episode is just filled with nothing or doesn't actually commit to the meteor moments it sets up. And this translates into the real world. Even in circles of supposed allies, the moment you start talking about anti-blackness, misogyny, transphobia, ableism, and all the things that TROC is meant to be a stand-in for, out come the defensive fence-sitters talking about divisiveness, how you're just reaching, you're too sensitive, that the left is eating itself, and all the other ways to protect the oppressor they happen to like. That's also why there's this push to view this episode as being too unsubtle had they just gone the direct route and had Cyborg say, "Because I'm black."
Is it cause I'm black? Is it cause I'm black? Cause I'm black!
Being a person in Starfire's shoes, an oppressed person subjected to bigoted language and violence, means that more often you're told to make nice and keep quiet, lest you detract from the bigger issue. It's happened time and time again where a person is murdered by police or bigoted violence from really just anyone, and the narrative shifts towards dehumanizing and blaming the victim, seeing them as having done something to deserve the brutality they suffered. Real life does have situations where you can't always directly speak up, but these are due to power imbalances which are what create the conditions for the bigotry in the first place. In looking up how others talk about this episode, nearly everyone points to this as some kind of positive for Starfire, that she handled it maturely, as if to imply that reacting in a perfectly reasonable way is immature. But that very idea is insidious, right? It reinforces the belief that victims are only deserving of empathy and attention if they perform in a way that's proper and right. There's a reason why the idea of the perfect kind of victim comes up and is used to blame people when domestic or bigoted violence reaches public discourse. A lot of people's understanding of slurs begins and ends with what they think is socially taboo enough, but don't interrogate the narratives the slur itself is reinforcing. There's an alarming number of people who don't think of the T-slur, this one, as a transphobic slur because of how prevalent it shows up in anime and other forms of media. The narrative surrounding the idea of viewing trans people as deceitful and tricking you with their gender is inherently transphobic no matter what word you try to substitute it with. Your intentions don't matter. It doesn't matter if you stop calling people the R slur if you substitute it with several ableist words that reinforce the same concepts in line of thinking that made the R slur harmful in the first place. TROC is a xenophobic slur toward the Tamaranians, but Tamaran obviously isn't a real place. We get that it's mean and hurtful and intended to dehumanize, but that nuance doesn't come through when the show frames it as something Starfire can ignore. We're told that other planets view Tamaranians as inherently inferior, which, okay, but it also doesn't relay any narrative of oppression towards Starfire. There is violence towards Starfire though. The episode just decides it's not important. You see, Valuor weaponizes this mission and sends Starfire off on a deadly job. He assigns her the task of exiting the ship and carefully moving mines that could easily explode and kill her. Yes, Valuor disclosed the fact that the mission is dangerous at the start of the episode, but that doesn't change the fact that you take steps to reduce risks. Valuor put people in positions like Cyborg on the engines and Robin at Nav because it suits their strengths. Even then, there's still an understanding from the group that they show concern for Starfire and her agency. Robin tries charging out into space to help her. Cyborg notices she's uncomfortable, and even though he doesn't know about the xenophobia part yet, he still follows up with Starfire to confirm that she's actually okay with her role in the mission. That's what makes Valuor's targeted violence towards Starfire all the more gross when the episode never takes it into consideration, with Starfire deciding to set aside her feelings. This is best shown in Valuor's expressions. Look at his face when everyone has shock or worry, and then we see Valuor's face when the explosion goes off. His face only changes with this reaction when they hear Starfire's voice, the confirmation that she made it out here alive.
You may proceed safely.
Here he groans with annoyance at most, but only because she got in the way of the mission, not out of concern for her safety. There's no divorcing the fact that he's a bigot from the way he intentionally places her in a dangerous mission with no regard for her safety. He's a superhero, but he also violently tries to kill her, and it's not just that it's a kill attempt, but he does so in a way that makes it look like he has no culpability. She was the right person for the job since she can survive in space, doesn't change the way that on some level he hoped for her death and had no problem putting her life in danger in a way he doesn't do for the others.
Now, I'm going to get out of here before she blows, but you're welcome to stay.
The "our mission is more important than my feelings" attitude would be fine to include if this was something Starfire was challenged on, and it almost seems like it will be, given that Robin is the one who's ready to beat this dude's ass and make him give Starfire the respect she deserves. The scene of Starfire clenching her fists and holding back her anger she's being called a slur hits the most for me, and not in a good way. The real reason most people in Starfire's position have to clench their fist and stay quiet like that isn't because there's a bigger, more important thing to focus on, but because the supposed allies around you only have your back if you perform in the right way and make sure to center their comfort when you express what's going on.
I'm going after Starfire! She can handle herself.
How much farther to our goal?
Having trouble keeping up?
They're trying to run on the idea that Robin knows Starfire is strong enough for the task, which she is, but that's not really the issue here. Yes, there's a job to do, but the stakes of having a dangerous mission undermines this commentary, because we're left with the takeaway that, sure, racism sucks, but you just gotta swallow it up and deal, and we need to focus on what's more important. I just think about how many times I've heard self-proclaimed white leftists and allied friends insist that I'm being divisive, or saying things like racism, ableism, queerphobia are just distractions the ruling class uses to divide people. And that's not right or useful in the slightest. But then Val-Yor is trapped in this force field thing and Starfire saves her racist even while he's calling her slurs.
Keep your filthy hands off me, Strock!
You may not value my life, but I still value yours.
This episode can fuck right off. It's not that I wanted Val-Yor to see the error of his ways. The writers are imparting this idea that to be in Starfire's position is to set aside what's happening to you, even in the face of actual violence and the threat of death with Starfire's level of grace. The story does make it clear that she didn't have to do that, but they have the situation of Starfire trying to prove herself to flex on him that he was wrong about his beliefs about her. Framing victims of bigoted violence as mature or the bigger person for stomaching their valid anger sets the precedent that there must be a proper or right victim of institutional violence for it to be worth challenging. Angry black woman stereotype, anyone?
He's
Hell
calling you a
no.
terrible name. And you know that if you punch him out, it'll just confirm all the bad stuff he thinks about you.
Yes.
He corrects himself and still uses slurs, and it becomes clear he's not meant to turn around and change for the better. You can't change bigots, which is a fine lesson, but incomplete when she turned around, saved him, and ultimately set aside her feelings in a way that doesn't address the actual problem. We really need to cut it out with media creating characters who are the target of violence and bigotry being presented as sympathetic or nuanced for showing kindness, patience, and forgiveness toward those who in no way deserve it, or present them as going too far or evil for taking retaliatory action, or making characters who challenge a status quo villains. It projects a lot of white fears about oppressed people acting against them. So, what are the problems of this episode? Number 1. The show takes an individualist approach to how they view bigotry and slurs. They treat Val-Yor's violent xenophobia and actual murder attempt as just mean words Starfire can and should ignore. Because she has people who care about her? You can still have friends and allies and still be subjected to violence like Star was. Number 2, it makes the actual people the allegory is making the comparison to, in this case Cyborg as a black disabled boy, the face of poor allyship. Number 3, they have Starfire presented as strong and kind for being able to shoulder and stomach abuse, reinforcing the idea that victims must perform in a very specific way and be viewed as virtuous and mature enough to be deserving of empathy. Trock comes to the right if obvious conclusion that slurs are bad and you should stand up to people like Val-Yor and support oppressed people. But the problem is that it does it in a way where Starfire is subjected to the very respectability politics the show is supposedly trying to critique. Remember, everyone believes in human rights, but the question is who do they view as human and deserving of life?